I've ridden what many call the two best RMCs on the East Coast, Wildcat's Revenge at Hersheypark and Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. Today, I want to figure out which one is better by comparing the two in a head-to-head battle. Before we start this battle, I would just like to note that these are the only two RMCs that I have ridden as of the recording of this, which is late April of 2025. There are other RMCs on the East Coast like Wicked Cyclone, Lightning Rod, Twisted Cyclone, etc., that some may consider better than these two, but I've heard from many that these are the two best RMCs on the East Coast. Starting with the theme, Twisted Timbers has a more apparent theme from the queue entrance where you're walking around and you see like the starship thing and the flying tractor over the queue. In the station itself, where there's like, the apple crates and stuff, there's a lot more there than Wildcat, which, if you walk around Wildcat's queue, it's pretty bare. Then you get up to the station, it has nice colors and stuff, and there's really good theme music, but it's not on par. So this kind of plays off of the theming a little bit, but the next one for me is going to be train design. Now, I know I said Twisted Timbers has a better theme, but to me, Wildcat's Revenge has a better train design. If you look at the front, it has that big old, wildcat sticking out of it and kind of doing that, claw thing. To me, that looks better than the Twisted Timbers train, which is kind of like a rusty-looking car, which has a cool vibe and cool aspect, and it definitely plays in a little bit, but just, the Wildcat's Revenge train is just, you look at that, and that's like, man, that's pretty badass. So that's why Wildcat's Revenge gets the point on the train design. Next with the drop, so both rides do have great drops. Wildcats is steep and you have a fast descent down, and then Twisted Timbers has the barrel roll drop, which is a really cool sensation if you've never experienced it. But, of course, the barrel roll drop is definitely more interesting, however, because, only a couple rides out there have that similar element. The only ones I can think of is the other two RMCs that have it, Storm Chaser and Medusa Steel Coaster. And in the back row, that barrel roll just has that whip around, and it is so cool. So Twisted Timbers gets that second point easy. So most people, when they do these battle videos, kind of go off of height or speed and stuff like that. But usually one ride always wins those points. It's one's usually taller than the others, that and the other. So to me, that's not fair. So the next point here is going to go to Wildcat for its following element. Now, Wildcat's element after the drop is that step-up underflip, which goes way up that old lift-hill structure and flips over and then flies down the curved drop on the other side. Twisted Timbers is just a turn. You do a small bunny hop and then you fly over a turn, which that turn is fast, but it's not like that step-up underflip for that first standout element, so Wildcat gets its first point. Now, Twisted Timbers ain't giving in yet because it definitely wins the airtime battle. Twisted Timbers has over 10 moments of airtime. Wildcat's Revenge, I can only think about 5 or so. The airtime on Twisted Timbers is just so intense and it's so wild. Every single pop, you're flying out of your seat and into that restraint to the point where it can be a little uncomfortable for someone who has bigger legs like myself. So, it's definitely an unforgettable aspect of the ride, and that easily wins at the point. Even though Twisted Timbers has the airtime, Wildcat definitely gets the point for the inversions. The inversions feel so much smoother and so much more drawn out than Twisted Timbers do. Twisted Timbers has the cutback, which is a really odd element, and then the zero G roll, kind of towards the end of the ride, which is pretty whippy, which is good, but, I prefer a more drawn out zero G roll, and then, of course, the barrel roll drop at the beginning, depending on your row, can vary on how much whip you get. But Wildcat, you have the step-up underflip, which is more graceful than whippy, in my opinion. And then you have the stall, which has a little bit of whip, but, you really just kind of glide through it. And then the other two zero G rolls. That second one does have more whip than the rest of the inversions, in my opinion. But, it justifies. It's just the inversions just are so much better than on Twisted Timbers. Next up is pacing. Now, both these rides have fantastic pacing. Probably the two best paced rides I've probably ever ridden. So this is definitely a trickier one to choose from, but I think I have to pick Wildcat's Revenge on this one, and here's the reason. From start to finish, Wildcat's Revenge hauls through each element relentlessly. Absolutely no stopping at all. Each and every element feels like it just kind of flies through smoothly, but just absolutely hauls through. Twisted Timbers does have a few slower moments. The two I think of is the cutback and the final two airtime moments as you're returning back to the station. So I think just because of mainly the cutback that kind of just whips through a little bit slower than the rest, I think that's the only thing here that really puts Wildcat's Revenge over Twisted Timbers on the pacing portion. Before we continue any further, I would like to point out two other similarities that these rides have, which is a loud chain lift.
Oh, that's so nice. Look at that.
And the restraints. So the lift on both rides are super loud, but oddly enough, you actually can't hear them from too far beyond the ride area. It's mainly when the trains approach the chain and actually hit the chain lift is when that big loud boom kind of happens, which is nothing out of the ordinary really, because a lot of rides do a similar thing, but for some reason on Twisted Timbers and Wildcat's Revenge, they're both super loud. And also the restraints, which both rides have RMC signature trains, which I believe got their start on Twisted Timbers in 2018. But Lightning Rod has a similar restraint system, but Gerstlauer, I believe, built the trains for RMC first. So I don't know if Lightning Rods were Gerstlauer trains or RMC's trains, but Lightning Rod or Twisted Timbers did the RMC trains first. I forget which one exactly, but still Vengeance also debuted with RMC trains. Now for the layout. Like I mentioned before, Twisted Timbers is a more airtime focused ride, while Wildcat's Revenge is a more wave turn and inversion based ride. Actually, did you know that Twisted Timbers never makes a left turn during the ride? Which to me is kind of crazy, but it does not win at the point over Wildcat. Wildcat to me is a more diverse layout, which is kind of a given since RMC did have more to work with, which isn't necessarily the fault of Twisted Timbers, but I feel they probably still could have made that layout more than just airtime hills for the most part, which, yeah, I know it has that kind of wave turning like section there in the middle, but it's just super snappy, which some people really like. But to me, I feel like the diverse and spread out layout of Wildcat is just, to me, better than Twisted Timbers. We have just two more categories to go, and this one's kind of an odd one. That is, which ride fits its park better? Now, both rides have a good argument for this one. Wildcat's Revenge is the only truly standard inverting coaster in the park, besides Super Duper Looper. I know some will say Fahrenheit, but it's different to me because it's a vertical lift. Storm Runner because it has a launch. Wildcat also gives its park a good ejector airtime, which neither of the Woodies really do, and Candemonium to me is more floater. I mean, you could give an argument for Skyrush though. Twisted Timbers also fills its standard inverting gap since Anaconda was removed and Raptera is a wing coaster. I guess you could say Dominator as well, but I mean, the inversions on Twisted Timbers are kind of different than Dominators. They're a little more snappy and not so drawn out. Both rides to me truly complement their parks. I mean, some say King's Dominion with Twisted Timbers and Pantherian is a great 1-2 punch. And Wildcat's Revenge, some say, gave the park a new number one besides Skyrush or Candemonium, depending on your pick. So I think both parks will receive a point for this one, because they both truly do the same thing for their parks, and they do it so well. Now, this may sound out of order from the last category, but I think the final category needs to be the ride's finale. Which ride ends better? Now, to me, this is an obvious winner, Wildcat's Revenge. I mean, you have that final 0G roll into a couple sideways airtime hills, and you just whip right into the brake run. It's the whippiest part of the ride, but I think it just really punches the ride in as like a crazy ride for the park. Twisted Timbers ends the same way that the ride kind of has a middle portion, just like bunny hills. Like, after you do that cutback, you kind of hit bunny hills, then you flip, and then you invert, and then you come back around and do bunny hills again when you end. I feel like that repetition, those bunny hills are great. They give good airtime. But I think that repetition of what the ride had kind of just done is why Wildcat's Revenge gets the point, because it does something different than what it was already doing, but from, it was doing some airtime, then it does, the 0G rolls, and then it does like the sideways airtime, which the ride doesn't really do before that. It just, to me, it seals that ride off better. So that gives us a final score. The winner of today's battle, you could say, between Wildcat's Revenge and Twisted Timbers is Wildcat's Revenge Easy with a score of 7-4. To me, Wildcat's Revenge is the better ride. I mean, it kind of has everything, has a nice drop, first element is amazing, and then the ride just kind of hauls from there, going through each element, which each element is a little bit different from the last, and it just has perfect pacing and perfect pretty much everything. That's why I consider it my number one roller coaster, which I know it's like, well, why are you putting your number one against another coaster? Twisted Timbers is my number two. So I feel like if I put it up this way, then I could see which rides do I truly prefer. Because once I heard Twisted Timbers, I'm like, man, that was good, but I don't really know if it was better than Wildcat's Revenge, so I think now we have a more clear winner. The better coaster between Wildcat's Revenge and Twisted Timbers is Wildcat's Revenge.